So I'm really happy to join today's Link and Learn to share initial insights that characterised the beginning stages of our Design Sprint Research Week. For context, this was rapid research where we had a pre-agreed question following an internal research question workshop, and it resulted in multiple outputs that my colleague Richie will also refer to later. But at this early stage, we considered the concept of learner agency and also autonomy in the classroom, and then focused the lens on a specific angle related to challenges emerging from this research and in response to feedback from teachers in the classroom. So we have 3 initial report outputs that will be made available on our website shortly, and the insights I'm sharing this afternoon are snapshots from these reports. So first, let's take a look at why this question matters. So we know that AI is rapidly entering classrooms and workplaces, and it is increasingly performing different cognitive tasks. And the risks here are that we're having our learners outsource their thinking, and potentially there's a loss of skills from that. But there are also opportunities for potentially scaffolding autonomy as well, and viewing AI as a tool for guidance and support to empower learners with scalable growth for future skills. And that was the key focus of our research week. So in addition to this, we also have the OECD Future of Education and Skills Project 2030, and they pose this question: how can we prepare students for jobs that have not yet been created, to tackle societal challenges that we can't yet imagine, and to use technologies that have not yet been invented? So this project places learner agency at its very heart, arguing that education must shift from the delivery of skills and knowledge to creating opportunities for learners to become agentic learners who can navigate an uncertain future, shape their own lives, and contribute to the lives of others. This represents a fundamental reorientation where we know now students are not passive recipients of instruction, but rather co-creators of their educational and professional development. So let's take a step back for a moment and consider the concept of learner agency. Defined broadly, learner agency refers to the capacity of learners to act independently and make choices about their learning processes. It sounds simple, but it's not. This draws on the influential research by Bista and Tedder and is often cited in more recent work on learner agency in schooling and in curriculum design. The prioritization of learner agency, also influenced by Dewey's vision of education as a cultivator of the political foundation of democracies, has been long recognized, and developing students' capacity for autonomous decision-making is not supplementary to education, but rather foundational to it. So to summarize this point, learner agency is a learner's ability to set goals, to make choices, to monitor progress, and reflect on their outcomes. And these also help students develop autonomy in their learning when their learning has purpose to them and has meaning. Some examples in the classroom could be choice in assignments, co-design of assessment rubrics, goal setting, student-led discussion, learning strategies and tools, and community involvement brings meaning and purpose to learning too. So basically, as I said before, its agency then shifts the learner from being a passive recipient to an active decision maker. And agency has its roots in earlier progressive education. Another example of progressive education is inquiry-based learning and the International Baccalaureate, where students are famously referred to as agents of their own learning. And now we have the new primary curriculum framework in Ireland, where there's explicit reference to agency and flexibility in schools, and indeed agentic teachers. As part of our focus during the design sprint, we looked at the Irish junior cycle that also explicitly emphasises student agency through classroom-based assessments, self-reflection, and student involvement in assessment criteria. So it's fair to say agency most certainly matters. And beyond the classroom, there's also the reality that we have an uncertain future skills landscape, AI performing knowledge tasks, and the need for metacognition and self-regulation. And that brought us to the tension in education with AI, because there is a paradox there with 2 competing outcomes. That AI may help by scaffolding thinking, providing prompts, personalizing learning, but we know it also may harm by creating dependency, reducing productive struggle, which is, I think, a really important point that emerged, that there's that sweet spot of tension in learning where learners need to be challenged and they need to be given that extra step to progress in their learning. And also it may replace decision making. So there's a real push and pull factor there. And it's widely been discussed about keeping the human in the loop. And I recently heard Elaine Berg on her podcast For Tech's Sake refer to reframe this phrase as rather the expert in command. So this led us to a question posed by Muta et al. In Where is Agency Moving to? Can AI strengthen agency instead of weakening it? As we progressed with the design sprint, as Richie will delve into deeper later, we kept this question clearly at the forefront of our mind as we continued. So the idea of autonomy sounds attractive and the idea of agency in the classroom, but it's not easy. And there are so many reasons for this. It's a complex area with multiple factors at play. One element is that many students are used to highly structured teacher-directed tasks. And our own high-stakes end-of-school examinations in the Leaving Cert in Ireland is a great example of this. Being geared towards learning how to best answer an exam paper, by way of an example, can leave open-ended project work feeling vague and sometimes risky for a learner. Self-regulation and self-direction draw on skills that vary so widely, like planning, time management, coping with uncertainty, accurately judging one's own work, and knowing what good looks like. So without supports, this autonomy to do so can amplify existing gaps, and more confident or resourced students can benefit, whereas others have the potential to feel lost or perhaps disengaged. Emerging surveys suggest many students meet AI first as a shortcut to getting the job done, to save time in assessments or assignments, rather than a thinking partner whose outputs they should interrogate. And without explicit AI literacy teaching and these habits of forming that way, students are unlikely to spontaneously treat AI as the fallible assistant that it is. They often copy, paste, and move on. And so the whole concept of having the expert in command becomes essential. And so our second report highlighted classroom-based scenarios, of which 4 were described. But in the interest of time this afternoon, I'm going to share one that we based the rest of the design sprint on. And it was considering how agentic AI could be integrated with this scenario. So we were inspired by classroom-based assessments based on feedback from teachers as well. And we thought about how to co-create so that students are not just given targets during these CBAs, but they're actually helping to build those targets and making them rich. And if you look at the bottom of the slide, I suppose it links straight back to the challenge. Like it's framed by the challenge that if students don't know their own goals well and they don't own them, then how can we expect them to be motivated to achieve? And to achieve what? So clarity from them at the beginning of having purpose and meaning and co-ownership is really important. In terms of the Agentic AI tool, we looked at how the tool could analyze performance data, identify knowledge gaps, suggest personalized goal refinements, and tracking the project milestones as they moved through that CBA so that they could become scaffolded to achieve the end point. Some teachers responded and said that they felt that sometimes students with the lack of autonomy did not reflect their ambition or their potential in how they were submitting their work. And so it brings us to the next section. To validate these assumptions, really, we went and interviewed teachers. And during the course of that week, we were fortunate enough to access 10 teachers, multiple different jurisdictions, and we conducted interviews with them. So on the left of the screen, you'll see sample questions. I have taken 3 for the purpose of the slide, but we asked them, we had 10 specific questions to gather as much information as possible. And I noticed at the bottom, the question that was really insightful for the purpose of this discussion this afternoon is, what would an AI tool need to do for you to trust it to support teachers without replacing your role? And you can see some of the answers on the screen. And I'm going to pick out 1 or 2 of them. One teacher said, independent thinking is quite the challenge after years of teaching to the exam paper. Students ask, what do you want me to say next, sir? Another teacher said, oh, can the AI tool help students to think by prompting under a particular theme, but not going to the final answer? And can it adapt its prompt depending on performance? Another teacher said, the AI tool would have to be very specific with its boundaries on what it could do and what it couldn't do. Teaching A-level coursework means AI is more commonly our enemy than our ally. And as you can see, this teacher is clearly in Northern Ireland talking about A-level coursework. Another teacher said, students need habitual experience of autonomy in their learning to become skilled at it. It's not as easy as it looks. And so we summarized the matrix of answers that we gathered, and we had the top 4 that came out very clearly as the strongest. Students need clarity on what good looks like. Teachers want support, not replacement. AI should guide thinking rather than give answers. And AI as a cognitive scaffold and not a solution provider. And specific with regards to AI and supporting agency, they said, we'd like it to prompt reflection. We'd like it to require student decisions. We'd like it to fade that support over time as a student becomes stronger and autonomous. And we'd like to keep the teachers in control. And it was interesting that this really echoed back to a lot of the research that we had done in the first part. And so this also brings us to our design implications for the rest of our week. So instead of here is the answer, we thought it should be more, what do you think the next step might be? So we imagined a Socratic style of AI here. And with research, teacher validation, classroom scenarios taken into account, we could conclude at this stage that the integration of agentic AI into the classroom scenarios designed to develop learner agency, it's neither straightforwardly beneficial nor inherently harmful, but rather, as Muta et al. Highlight in their paper, outcomes depend fundamentally on how such tools are designed, implemented, and then governed within relational pedagogical contexts. So, the proposed agentic AI tool, therefore, must be conceived not as an autonomous agent that replaces human decision-making, but as a carefully constrained assistant that operates within boundaries defined by teachers, students, and educational communities, with a commitment to preserving the cognitive struggle, the social interaction, and democratic participation through which genuine learner agency develops. So now I'm going to hand you over to Richie, who will outline the shift from insight to solution and the rest of the design sprint process.
Hello. Thank you, Helena. Okay, my slides are there. Great. Thank you, Helena, for setting the scene beautifully there. My name is Richard Hart, and I'll be talking about using Design Sprint to rapidly design a tool to support learner agency. And you'll notice that I'll be building on the work that Helena has already described. So before I get into the area of learner agency and how we attempted to design a tool, I'll just briefly describe what a design sprint is. So using a paraphrased version of the definition from Google Ventures and from Miro, a design sprint or a research sprint is a 5-day endeavor following an intensive structured process to fast track innovation, tackle complex challenges, and test new concepts. It is a distilled and concentrated methodology based on design thinking, innovation activities, and agile principles. So on day 1, we spend the day understanding the focus and the landscape we're working in and come up with a clear set of research questions in most cases. We spend Tuesday understanding the users, developing user personas, and trying to figure out what problems they have that we can support with. We spend Wednesday gathering data, validating the problems that we assumed that these users have. So Helena already described that quite well with the teacher interviews that we did. Thursday is a building day, so it's about converting those insights we gathered on Wednesday into user requirements and building prototypes based on those requirements. And then Friday is a day to summarize and reflect what we have done. And as Helena said, we will be sharing some of the outputs from that research week with you a little bit later. So our innovation approach follows this general kind of cycle. So Helena already described a lot of the background research that went into this. Then we take that research and we start the jobs be done process, which is where we're focusing on the user. What does the user need? And what are their characteristics? What is the context of use in which they're operating? We validate our assumptions. We ideate within solution workshops. We build user flows. We storyboard out those flows. we build prototypes, and then we reflect and ask ourselves, did we build the right thing? And that usually involves another cycle of validating with users. So, as Helena said, internally we agreed on a general question for the week. And the question was, is agentic AI fostering the emergence of the agentic learner or reshaping what learner agency means in practice? So let's break that down a little bit further. So agentic AI is a system that can accomplish a specific goal with limited supervision. Agents can specialize in specific tasks. Some agents are simple, performing a single repetitive task reliably, like, for example, with a spreadsheet or a set of data. Others can use perception and draw on memory to solve more complex problems. For example, like Helena mentioned about CBAs within the junior cert, guiding a student through a medium to long-term project. Learner agency is the ability to set goals, make choices, monitor progress, and reflect on outcomes. So an agentic learner then is a student who has learned how to learn and develop habits of mind that support active engagement and autonomy in their learning, relations, and strategies. So let's break it down day by day. Monday was spent understanding the focus and the landscape we're operating in. So we use things like research question workshops to break down that question, basically dump everything we know about this area, everything we could find online or from academic sources, and try to hone in on a number of questions that we could answer. So, for example, what is the current classroom context? What is learner agency and how do you measure it? How do teachers speak about and identify learner agency? What are scenarios where agentic AI could support project-based learning? How do we design agentic AI that can measure or support learner agency? What are recommendations for developing pedagogical AI agents? Are there current design guidelines from a UX and UI lens? And what are the current state-of-the-art tools in this space and what are their features? So, for example, one activity that we ran on Monday was a brief state of the market analysis of tools like CanMigo, Socratic, and Along. So we wanted to get an understanding of what technology is already out there that's attempting to do this. More on that later. On Tuesday, we spent the day doing our jobs to be done. So jobs to be done is a process where we identify who is the user we're trying to target, what is their persona, and what problems are they trying to solve. As part of this, we developed user personas. So we can develop a whole range of user personas from the early adopters, the innovators, the skeptical teachers, the teachers that work in different contexts, whether it's well-resourced schools, poorly resourced schools, teachers that work in different levels, whether it's primary or secondary. So we can start to map out the characteristics of these users. What are their influences? What kind of technology do they already use? What are the relevant personality traits? And what are the current challenges that they experience in the classroom? We then go and collect data. So this was what Helena was referring to earlier. We went out and interviewed 10 teachers on Wednesday. We built, we tried to validate some of the assumptions that we had made about these personas. We collected quotes from these teachers. Helena already went through some of those earlier. And then what we have to do with those insights is convert them into user requirements. So what do teachers need? For example, a planning support must include decoding language and clarifying goals, not just task lists. Guidance must explicitly build critical evaluation, sources, bias, prompts, and growth mindset. And teacher dashboards should foreground agency signals, for example, reflection, effort, source use, and not just marks. So we have to ensure that we're building a list of user requirements that reflect the insights that we've collected from teachers. Thursday is the build day. So we come up with how might we statements. And a how might we statement looks something like this. How might we design a teacher-facilitated classroom-based project support tool which enables students to set and revisit their own goals, refine their timelines, make meaningful decisions about processes and products, and use ongoing reflection with or without AI support as needed to progressively deepen their learner agency over time. So we run things like solution workshops where we diverge with ideation and then converge with voting ideas into idea shopping carts. We then take these converged ideas and we try to map them out in a step-by-step process according to the user perspective. So we ask ourselves, how would a teacher actually use this tool? We can then consolidate those user flows using, for example, AI tools to help us identify redundancies in the flows or gaps in the flows. We can then ask AI to build simple storyboards for us that walk through how a student and a teacher would interact with such a tool. We can then ask the AI to develop visual storyboards for us, where we actually see students and teachers interacting with screens and functions on the platform itself. All the while, we're asking ourselves, what are the UX considerations of such a tool? We want UX patterns that frame AI as coach or thinking partner, avoiding authority and preserving student ownership. We want to specify interaction and scaffolding levers, Socratic prompts, fading hints, transparency to prevent dependency and support, as Helena pointed out, productive struggle. And we want to emphasize teacher oversight, feedback literacy, and data autonomy as essential safeguards for the ethical, agency-preserving AI use. And all the while, we're ensuring we're still working within the context that we originally set out in the background research. We're integrating things like junior cycle curriculum to ensure that the user flow makes sense according to the real-world workflow within an Irish classroom. And then the fun part, we're building wireframes. We're starting to develop UX frameworks and implement that in UI prototypes that users can view and give feedback on. We're also, again, with the help of AI, building simulated chatbots. So we can actually build simple chatbots that take in some of these design principles and actually present real-world prompts to students based on a particular project or subject area within the junior cert. And then Friday. On Friday, we sit back and we try and consolidate all the research we've done throughout the week, some of which we are going to share with you directly in a short while. But here are examples of some of the outputs. For example, we have a number of reports. Helena already alluded to a couple of them, classroom scenarios, and the overall developing learner agency through Agentic AI and junior cycle CBAs. But we also have short reports on the market scan that we did and UX best practice. We developed a simple conversational prototype. We developed a visual simulation of the chatbot and a chatbot prototype that can be interacted with. And of course, to keep up with the current trends, we developed a short podcast about our work and a short video as well. So to sum up, sustained engagement with Agentic AI can support learner agency development when systems are designed, implemented, and governed with explicit commitment to transparency, teacher oversight, democratic participation, and cultural sensitivity. From our work, the feedback we got from educators, we know they want agency supporting learning companions that guide students through the learning process, utilizing Socratic prompts and fading hints within an assist as needed paradigm to prevent dependency and support productive struggle. And the impact of these tools won't depend necessarily on the power of the technology itself, but on the design choices, pedagogical intentionality, institutional commitment to equality, and robust governance frameworks. So what next? Well, one thing we can do is a deeper validation of the prototypes we built with teachers to iterate a classroom-ready prototype. We, of course, are going to disseminate our research outputs to you, the wider community, to gain further expert perspectives. And obviously, we would like to extend the research to other contexts within the spirit, of course, of this webinar, such as the workplace or third level. Thank you very much. You can direct any questions you have into the chat, or you can email me here at Learnovate. There's a QR code for my contact details, or you can just ask for them at the end, and we'll do our best to answer any questions you have. And I'm going to hand back to Louise now.
Thank you, Richie. That was great. And thank you, Helena. And don't forget that our research is available to all of our members. So if you would like to get in touch with me to talk about membership, please do so. There's also still time to do one of the polls that we are running during this event. They're available there on the right of your screen if you just click polls beside chat. And now I'm delighted to introduce you to the panelists for our panel discussion. We have Jonathan Dempsey, we have Zoe Falder, Nathan Cullen, and Melanie Mead.
Hello, Jonathan Dempsey. I am commercial lead on a commercialization project funded by Enterprise Ireland in Learnovate, currently due to spin out this year from Learnovate. And I am very pleased to chair this session. I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. If I could ask you perhaps first, Melanie.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melanie Gwynn. I'm the Dean of Education in Hibernia College, just across the road from Learnovate. And Hibernia College has many activities, but one of the main ones is teacher education, and it's 25 years as a teacher education provider in Ireland.
Perfect. Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hey, everyone. My name is Nathan Cullen. I am the Country General Manager for IBM in Ireland. I'm responsible for IBM's operations strategy and our commercial arm.
Super. Thanks, Nathan. Zoe.
Hi there. I'm Zoe. I'm head of content here in Cubicle. I have nearly 15 years working in learning and development. I've worked as an instructional designer, learning tech, learning delivery. In Cubicle, we're building learning content to curate learning experiences through our in-house platform and serve the needs of our customers.
Brilliant. Thanks a million. Okay, so I'm going to ask a general question. So Helena and Richard's research really talks about AI acting as a thinking partner rather than just giving answers. I'd like to hear from each of you, and perhaps starting with Zoe. How realistic is this in real world learning?
Honestly, very realistic. But it all comes down to how we design and curate the AI-supported learning experiences. And as was mentioned in the presentations, how we support the learners in their own AI literacy. So AI is powerful, and even in its most simplistic guise, it appears to have all of the answers. It's very easy for learners or anyone to easily get lulled into over-reliance on it as an answer engine. So we know this does not lead to sustained learning. And if we can support learners and educators with the frameworks, tools, and behaviors, they will be in a position to get the best out of AI as a thought partner.
Yeah, cool. Same question to Nathan.
Yeah, I had to look up pedagogical during the session there. So within that context of it being the methods, theory, and practice of teaching, I can't really give you an answer. But I do think it's one of the toughest questions we face right now, right? How do we effectively bring AI into education? And the area I tend to focus on is how do we augment our early professional hires, the training they get as they enter an organization, as you know, graduates, as we take them in. How do we have to change the way we introduce them into an enterprise? And I think, you know, when it comes to, do we allow them to use it as an answer engine? I think we have to. And we allow it to be used as a thinking partner, which is the other side of it. I think we can do both, right? But it is a very important question. From an enterprise point of view, I tend to measure people through their revenue performance and otherwise. So, you know, the criticality of them delivering me a paper and being able to speak to a specific topic is not essential. I look at other KPIs. Hope that helps.
It does. I'll come to you in a second, Melanie, but I'm kind of struck by this migration from human in the loop to expert in command to educator in the loop. I'm not quite sure what we'll land on, but I think it is teacher is coming through very strongly as being really at the core of this. So same question to you, Melanie. How realistic is it?
I see it as being very realistic, and I'm conscious I can see some of the commentary in the chat there, and see Dermot has a comment in about normally conversations with teachers around AI can be quite negative about it, but I will have to say sometimes that's out of maybe not fully understanding, the affordances that AI brings to us as well. At the same time, being mindful that, and back to Nathan's point there, teaching and learning actually is relational, and the importance and the significance of that will never and can never be lost or underestimated. For us all, for any of us, Jonathan, to have had those light bulb moments when something suddenly makes sense after, in a class, when a teacher has worked with you, and you've got to that point. I mean, that's the relational aspect of it. What AI affordances do and can do even more now, they can support us, and they can support educators from a pedagogical perspective and promote good, solid pedagogy overall. But AI, we have to, there's all the guardrails, I suppose, that we need to put around it as well. But I do in 2026, and actually the adoption rate is very prolific right now. So we do need to kind of pause, I think, and take a breath, because sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. I found myself saying recently that I thought AI in education, in specific education context, was tending towards 100%, and it's not going away. Okay, let's get into some individual questions. So for Zoe, where do you see AI tools helping professionals take more ownership of their learning journeys rather than relying on structured courses only?
Yeah, so I mean, structured courses is one way that learning can happen in a professional environment, and we do know that professionals being quite busy, sometimes that structured learning can take a bit of a back seat. What I think AI enables is this hyper personalization. So curating learning experiences aligned to the specific needs and time requirements of professional learners at any given time. Learners can quickly ramp up a personalized coach to help guide them through a new learning goal. So, I mean, this was kind of covered a little bit when we're talking about the Socratic dialogue. It's a really powerful tool for personal development if they have a specific professional development goal that they're looking to lean on. These AI coaches can be quite robust. Many AI in-app assistants like Copilot and Gemini, they incorporate performance support when using their applications as well. So these are all kind of incorporated in the variety of different ways that people can engage in learning experiences. So AI really does empower learners to drive their own learning, but there's also the question as to what degree is it intentional, and what degree does it lead to long-term understanding and growth? And that really depends on how it's used. So this is where learning teams and instructors and educators can really continue to provide value, and also providing those frameworks for any kind of AI tools that we look to put out there. As Helena and Richie identified, a frictionless experience curated by a learner for ease may not deliver true understanding. And there will be no necessary transition of that skill or knowledge. We as learning professionals know that friction is a key part of learning, and that we can help learners by providing the guidance and support within those tools. And I think that that's kind of a key thing that we have to keep on remembering. So yes, we should empower learners to take that ownership. And there are kind of ways that we can do it already. And the way that technology is developing, it's becoming even more versatile in all of the different things it can do. But there needs to be that continued support, that continued learning principle behind a lot of those outcomes or those solutions that are being leveraged.
Jonathan, if I can jump in there, I think
sure.
What we see from an enterprise point of view is a similar scenario, but at scale, right? So you mentioned hyper-personalization, you mentioned a few things that we would definitely lean into. The function within our business that's leading the way, actually, when it comes to the adoption of AI is our HR organization. And speaking with them about how they've done it, yes, they did at the very beginning start bolting on AI onto processes, but now they've got to the point where they've fundamentally reimagined. what their processes are using AI and having it in there end to end. And one example of a process is, how people consume learning, right? So what's your problem or my problem as an employee when I go to consume learning? Is this learning fresh, right? Is it relevant, and is it aligned to my role? And what you have there is kind of a three-dimensional piece, right? Is it current? Is it relevant to where I want to be? So you need to start taking in and have the type of data specific to where someone has selected their career trajectory. Have they provided input to the point where they know where they want to go? And do we know where they are now, and what the difference is between where they are now and where they want to go? And can we then show them what the skills? And then the other part of that is, an organization, especially technology companies, given skills are changing so fast, we also have an as is and to be within our organization, right? Where we prioritize skills or know that we have skills gaps. And to do that, we have to develop a taxonomy of skills within our own org, map out where we are as an organization. And IBM is between 200,000 and 300,000 people. So that's a job and a half, right? But where do we want to be? And then how do we create the type of collateral that allows people to move forward? And that's a major moving target when you think of two ambitions together. You've got the corporate ambition, the individual. But that's where AI is good at this stuff, right? AI is really good at taking large amounts of data and making it more simple to understand and affect. And it's great that hyper-personalization piece allows for individuals within our organization to go in and say, actually, I want Nathan's job. So where am I now? You know what my skills are because I've gone in and I've refined that set based on your understanding and my adding a little bit of knowledge. What do I need to do next to get to the point where I can take over when he hits the road? And that AI can really make that a far more simple journey, a far more consistent journey, and a far more fresh journey, because it can understand that turn of education that we have within the system.
Yeah, really interesting. You completely anticipated my question, so I'm not going to ask it now. Brilliant. But I see just in the comments, Joe Rafus really supports what you're saying, that it has to be specific to the function and the purpose, right? Keeping flowing here a little bit. So, question for Melanie around teacher preparation. So you're Dean of Education in Hibernia, in case anybody joined us after introductions. And I'd just like to ask you, how do you see AI influencing how we prepare teachers for the classroom? So, balancing off that corporate with the educational aspects.
Yeah, so thanks.
Particularly when it comes to student autonomy. Sorry, Melanie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I'm thinking and, relating back to the concept of agency, which Helena referred to as well. So I suppose, I said at the outset about how teaching is relational, but it's also authentic and it's agentic. So when we prepare teachers, we're preparing teachers for the classroom of today and tomorrow. We're preparing teachers to teach students for jobs that have not yet been created. And in lots of cases that will be, supported by AI as well. So we see it, I suppose, it's a tool. It's an additional tool in a broad suite of tools. And it really helps teachers, student teachers and practicing teachers with conceptualization of content, a difficult, complex subject, how they're going to conceptualize that, how they're going to plan for that, how they might work an ideation up with a class or with a small group of pupils or learners, depending whether they're primary or post-primary. And it also helps in the assessment part of it as well. So we in Ireland now, we have at primary with the primary curriculum framework, and at post-primary we have an outcomes-based framework which focuses on learning outcomes, which students everyone achieves a learning outcome, albeit at different levels, so we can differentiate for that. And AI offers us really good tools to help us to achieve that with students. It also is hugely beneficial with universal design for learning, Jonathan, where, we can differentiate on the basis of student need. So students with special educational needs, additional educational needs, disability, where they can use assistive technologies, that really enhances their experience of education. And every student has to experience success at some point. So I would see in the preparation of teachers, one of the key messages we always relay to them is it's really important that every child, every student in your class has an experience of success in that class. So AI, and the different tools that are there, again, back to the pedagogy, the nuts and bolts of what we do, how we take piece of content, how we plan, how we teach it, assess it, and how do we actually satisfy ourselves as teachers that learning has happened. So AI offers us lots of ways of measuring that, lots of different pieces for all age groups. In actual fact, from junior infants right up to Leading Cert students, we can measure that. Lots of visuals there that younger learners whose literacy and numeracy levels mightn't be as advanced maybe as post-primary, AI offers us lots of pieces for that. I will say, and I did say it at the outset, sometimes student teachers can be quite overwhelmed by having to plan a lesson or a scheme of work and integrate the tools, the AI tools into it. And there's lots of ethical questions, around this, like, can I use this in my lesson? Is this authentic? Am I plagiarizing? Am I self-plagiarizing? Because obviously they're within the higher education institutional context as well. So, they have to conduct research. They have to be quite careful about that. So we do focus strongly on critical thinking, and evidence informed thinking around what they use, how they use it, and how they don't use it. Because sometimes it's not appropriate to use an AI tool to support your teaching. Sometimes you have to use a different approach. And that's one thing I think it's important to communicate, that whilst there are so many affordances there and the pace is so fast with it, it's part of an overall suite, an overall bag of tricks that you call on at different times, at different stages, whether you have outdoor learning taking place in primary or post-primary classrooms, whether you're in a science laboratory, in a PE hall, in a home economics classroom, lots of different ways we can do it. And we would promote that, but we do very much say it's not the be all and the end all, of it as well. The learning experience for learners is what keeps them keen, and it's what enhances learning overall and that experience of success.
Very good. Look, I think, something that's coming through very strongly for me is that we're thinking about how we're using AI to best effect for learning. And I think that's hugely valuable. Another question for you, Zoe. As AI becomes more embedded in learning platforms, how might we change how educational content is created and how it's used?
I think one of the areas, and probably the one I'm most familiar with, where there's the most opportunity is really in online learning. So with AI, it has become a much more versatile experience, and in some ways, not always, but in some ways can mirror an in-class experience and change kind of what blended learning is. For example, feedback can now be instantaneous and nuanced based on the learner's input rather than generic one size fits all. And also the modalities of online learning are also shifting. Like, it's come up quite a few times, like Socratic dialogue and coaches can be used in chat, and it's even been tested using avatars or AI generated avatars, though that's still quite expensive right now. Actually, one example that I came across quite recently was, I think, third level students looking to go into sort of consulting or professional services are now using AI case interviews to sort of get the practice in prior to their interviews with consultancy firms. So it's really kind of offering kind of these good simulation practice environments as well. We can also see kind of responsive learning design, where the trajectory of a learning experience can shift based on learner performance. And that's much easier to implement than it might have been before, especially implement at scale. And again, that kind of comes back to that hyper-personalized learning experience, not just based on like aligned to specific skills and outcomes that you're looking to get, but also like to your own kind of development progress. Another area where we're seeing development is kind of the end of long lead times for high quality learning experiences. So this is not just from automating elements of the production cycle, but kind of even reimagining it. So Richie kind of outlined some examples of what those outputs might look like. But some of the things we're kind of seeing is that in the professional world, in online learning, SMEs and learning designers' roles are kind of shifting a little bit. They're still providing kind of that initial thinking up front, but they're also becoming kind of critical appraisers of the AI work and output, and ensuring that it continues to align with the facts and the principles of the learning experiences that we're trying to get across. Actually, even with just enhancing the production cycles, the relevance through personalized experiences becomes easier. Yeah, we're aligning more closely. We're looking to align learning closely to work. So the actual work is happening through learning. And Nathan, you kind of mentioned kind of aligning or getting outcomes and KPIs. So is there a way that we can like meld the two together? And I know we have like learning in the flow of work, but what about work in the flow of learning, if you will? Sort of reverse it around a little bit. So there's a variety of different ways that educational content is kind of being created and used that AI is enabling and making more versatile, and even kind of changing the way that we think about developing it.
Cool. And actually, just going on that theme, Nathan, that suggests AI helping employees become more self-directed learners, right?
Yeah, it can definitely do that. And we've talked a little bit about the methodology we have internally within IBM to facilitate that, lining up your career aspiration with the statement of where you are and where you want to be, right? And providing the right collateral, the right direction for someone as they engage in that way. And I suppose a really important point from a business point of view when it comes to AI is if we're talking about AI as part of the mechanism for providing education, but education when it comes to AI itself is a massively important thing right now. And I think we're going to really miss a trick if we don't concentrate on it. When you examine, if you'll indulge me for a moment, the EU AI Act, or we look at the digital AI strategy coming from government right now, the direction of travel is really clear. Every organization must focus on building AI literacy within their workforce and confidence AI as well. And recent statistics we've gained from industry, I'm referring to an IBM EMEA study, only 36% of enterprises are actually prioritizing AI upskilling, which is really concerning.
Wow.
Explains a lot of reasons why current AI projects are either stalling or failing or sitting in project mode or pilot mode for as long as they are. And personally, I was at the American Chamber of Commerce event this morning where we were talking about FDI and building IBM Ireland or Ireland Inc. even, as I look first of all at the company that I represent and then into playing our part within Ireland. If I put on those hats, I often speak to the employees within the organisation as I maybe chair a town hall or otherwise. We need to make sure that as individuals and as a business, we're growing our skills. For example, if I secure a new mission, I want to knock that thing out of the park. That way I receive new mission from the organization. I'm seen as successful, and we're only seen as successful is if we've got the right skills, therefore the right talent in place. And from a business point of view, your strategy has to include AI literacy, skills development, and training. And if I'm to just pause for a moment and mention some of the concerns I have there, me talking about upskilling and education is kind of rich coming from ready access to tooling and a rich corpus, right? But there's a broader societal challenge here. We have public sector bodies, we've got small, medium enterprise with they don't have that ready access to education. And we need to be thinking about how do we make sure Ireland, from the SME point of view and the public sector point of view, have that ability to grow. And we risk creating a two-speed economy off the back of this, right? Where we have productivity levels with businesses that have access to education, as I described, like we've got, or other big tech firms, and then others that don't. So we need to be, I suppose, committed to lifting all ecosystems, right? Creating more open access to education. IBM, for example, we've created, I know other organizations are doing the same thing, something called Skills Build, which is a free global learning platform open to individuals and organizations. And I know most recently the UK government have adopted it, rolled out in the end. The Scottish government are doing the same thing. So we really need to, and I saw a comment in the chat there that kind of guided me. Yes, we do need to build skills from the top down, right? So we have an awareness of where we need to push the business, but we also need to make this education more broadly available. That way we can the ecosystem around us, right? And the offshoot for that, of course, being selfish, is the more capable people are, the more successful they are with their AI projects, the more clients I potentially have. So there's it lifts all boats, let's just say, the rising tide.
Cool. We're approaching close, but can I just encourage people who haven't done so yet, perhaps to have a look at the polls over on the right hand side, because I think there's some interesting perspectives there, and we can gather and learn from. I'd just like to go to you, Melanie, and ask you about education and workplace learning, and whether they're, and I think you're probably uniquely positioned for this, whether they're approaching learning using AI in similar ways, or are there important differences?
Yeah, so I suppose, look, there are some differences, but, and again, if I can just go back maybe to something that Nathan said, in terms of, how we're going to do this. So ultimately, we're going to do this through our initial teacher education, preparation of teachers to teach in primary and post-primary education, because that's the first rung in the ladder on that lifelong learning journey that everybody will be at. Like, we're fortunate in Ireland that we do very well at PISA. Our literacy levels are very strong. Our numeracy levels are very strong. Within that, the digital literacy skills are built in there as well. And curriculum is the way, to enhance that. So, there's always a question around, well, curriculum for whom? Curriculum for me as a teacher educator and a dean of education, curriculum for Nathan, in IBM, curriculum for Zoe. Curriculum affects us all. And curriculum reflects the bigger world and the bigger world issues. So teachers are at the coalface, meeting children and students every single day of the week in a very limited time frame. People think, there's lots of time in school. There's actually not. It's a very tight time frame to educate from the time a child comes to the early preschool year into junior infants and out at the end in a Leaving Cert. And it flies by. So we've huge opportunities there in that, imbuing confidence, I suppose, in our teachers and our teaching workforce. And we have the same teacher supply uses in this country as there are in other jurisdictions. But one thing we have a very strong continuum of teacher education, from initial teacher education to induction to the CPD element of it, where teachers are set up really skill-wise, and they in turn, are teaching children to that critical skill set that will enable them to have those literacy pieces. A really strong piece from the research that was presented earlier was the concept of making good decisions, and that's where the agency part comes into it. So nobody can give us agency. We all have to develop our own agency. Biesta talks about that a lot. Agency is something that develops over time, and agency and identity are very connected. So your identity as a teacher, a professional, who can embed those skills, who is confident enough to do that, and that your students then become confident in doing it, using the AI tools to do it. That's really the most important thing. So a big shout out on the teacher education side of things. I would say it's the most important aspect of the whole thing, because without it, we don't have anything on the other side. We have to absolutely remember that in the end of the day, our teaching workforce are absolutely critical in how we develop that.
Very cool. Thanks, Melanie. Listen, thanks all the panelists, Melanie, Nathan, and Zoe. Really interesting conversation. I think the conversation will be ongoing. I'm struck by the new standards for formal education in the UK that were issued in January. and a statement by a chap from Visa at a Learnovate event recently that nobody in the UK market, including the government provision, are meeting those standards currently. So look, I think in the workplace and in the education place and in professional education, we have a way to go. But I'm really encouraged by this conversation that we will find the right ways to go, and we're taking control of that conversation and progress, which is fantastic. I'm also thinking that possibly all this confetti is about the boys in green this evening, and I'll leave you with that.
Thanks a million, Jonathan. I feel the exact same way. Come on, you boys in green. Anyway, thanks to everybody for attending today. It was a really interesting event, and massive thank you to all of our speakers. We will be sharing the support materials from today with everybody who registered for the event, but the video will also be available on our YouTube channel, so you can share that with your colleagues, etc. And you can also view video content from lots of our events, from Learnovation, etc. So definitely worth having a look around there. And we look forward to seeing you at our next Link and Learn. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.